This house here is effectively a kit house. It was a design and build kit house. By kit, I mean the kit was made off-site, not that it's something off the peg. But the person who built it is a kit house builder. That's what he has his pattern jobs. And the client said, I want you to do it to the builder, but I don't like your design, so I want you to talk to Will. And so we came together and we came up with a proposal that used the technologies of timber kit building, that they could come into the beach here, unload a landing craft with diggers and the timber kit itself, bring it up to site and so on, and build it. And then use materials that were found on site, stone here, to wrap it up. So it's not this wonderful solid stone building you see. So there's a bit of fakery there, but actually that's what you feel when you're there. You feel the thick walls, you feel the quality of materials on the surfaces. And it's dealing with the realities of having to make a highly insulated, highly efficient building, and using technologies that local builders know how to use and don't charge through the earth, charge the earth for. It's the most vernacular building we've ever designed, and maybe the most vernacular building we ever designed, I don't know. But it actually still continues our exploration of space. So space pushing in one side of the building, defensive space by setting up these buttresses and enclosure at the back. And then on the seaward side, much more open, much more contemporary. But the massing of this building, the important thing about this building is part of a cluster of traditional black houses that were nominally 5 metres by 10 metres, and that was the size. They were sort of human height. So the proportion and the size of this building was very important to get right, but a 10 by 5 metre building was going to be too small. We didn't want to oomph up the height because it would then dominate the rest of the settlement. So we broke it up to effectively two nominally 10 metre by 5 metre sections with bits and bobs to join them and articulate them. Big leap forward, we're not here yet. This is a project we're working on near Biggar. Very simple building, being long house. That's a challenge in terms of planning the building into an old mill. And it's really in the wrong place there. I'll come on to the White House project, which took 3 times longer than the other coal house there to design and bring from first discussions with the client to site. And took twice as long to build as the other project. Only had 1 more bedroom than the other project. So it's a different sort of beast. The White House on Coal was the first square-cornered line-built building on the Isle of Coal. It was built by McLean of Coal when he started to sort of look outward to the way things were being done on the mainland and wanted to sort of have a sort of estately attitude to the island. So it's the start of the clearances, it's the start of modern farming methods, and this was the factor's house, the tackman's house, the person who looked after the laird's tack. And originally it had a first floor entrance here with a wooden stair up the outside. It's a very similar building on Mull, it's still got a roof on it. But with all the arrogance of an architect coming in from outside, they arrived and went, yes, we've built my nice big building here, right in the middle of this lovely spot, as Colware. This lovely dale coming down to the bay here, isn't it beautiful? And they built it on sand, because that was what was there. And the building lasted a few decades and then started to shift catastrophically, and then was not occupied after that. Amazingly, it survived. We reckon that they were down to literally just a further small stone falling out in the hole of one gable roof collapsed. It was that delicate and that terrifying when we were actually trying to do the work on it, consolidation work. Particularly this chimney, which had more of a hanging over nothing than it actually had sitting on something else. But what was of interest to us here in this landscape is how do you build around a building like this when really it's such an object, it's a finite object in itself, it has a complete story to tell. And it was very clear that the client wanted to find a reason to save this ruin from collapse. They couldn't just throw money at it and patch it up, because they didn't have a reason to do that. They wanted to spend money on a house for themselves. This ruin sat in the middle of their farm, so they wanted to turn it into their farmhouse. But how do you build around something like that? And we realised that we had to start thinking about the landscape and have any additional structures around the occupation of the ruin itself reflecting the landscape. And so we started quite a sort of thorough study of the nature of the landscape and how plants and people gain shelter in the landscape, and looked at the more traditional ways that buildings gain shelter. So these were the sensible buildings that happened beforehand, that people would find a dry patch up on a rocky outcrop, and they would use little outcrops of rock as a wall, and then they'd build their walls, and then their walls would tie into their buildings. And there was a real sense of these buildings and these structures locking into the landscape. And so we felt that the way to approach any of these structures around the old White House ruin was to take this sort of approach. So this is a drawing of all the Ordnance Survey recorded walls on Col, in that end of Col. And our site is that little thing up there. So there's an existing enclosure. So here's another building that ties into the walls around it and hunkers down. So we were interested in these aspects of actually doing something that was a bit of a reflection, but also a contrast to the main house itself. So analysing the site, we start to draw out the existing enclosures. These are all the original enclosure lines that are all on site. All the walls coming across here and down here, the burn coming across here. And the geology of the site is reflected in the way the enclosures move. And there's a sort of line, there's a sort of ley lines, if you want a better word, that follows the sort of most parallel lines that a lot of the walls follow. If we go back to this here, you can see there's a sort of pattern, a wall pattern, and it actually reflects the way the ice moved across the island during the Ice Age and scratched the island and scraped the island and made natural enclosures and natural walls that then people came along and they moved up over time. And so this is the building that started to emerge. So a building that occupation of the main ruin itself, and a building out here that is tied into wall structures and further enclosures to help make places of shelter and lock the building into the landscape and make places of shelter around the building itself, because Col is a ridiculously windy place, but it's quite a sunny place. So if you have shelter, you can be outside quite a lot, you can have your doors open quite a lot. So the nominal H shape of the building is to make pockets of shelter around it. So here's the building just before work was started. And these were the conditions that greeted the main contractor when they arrived. So the first thing they did was tie their huts down. It was a really interesting building site. It's the only building site I've been to that had surfboards and wetsuits sort of draped over the wall outside of the van. And they would go off and kite surf with their lunch breaks. I like that. But there was, I think that shows the engagement of the builders with the project, which was fantastic. And it also showed that it was a reflection of the sort of builder we wanted to work with and the clients wanted to work with, that it was a team effort. And as if by magic, a year later, they completed it. The logistical difficulties of building in the Hebrides are immense, so they can't be over-congratulated for their achievement there as contractors. The principal thing here is that this end of the ruin was too far gone to do anything with. This crack here is moved by 40 centimetres, so that wide, well, normally about that wide at the top. So there's no gluing it back together. The walls are twisted as well, so you can't just fill the crack because they've gone that way and that way. And there are similar cracks and twists in different places. Every panel of wall leans in a different way. It's like a sort of wonky dominoes all sort of stacked together. So we made the decision that actually there was a ruined quality that had value, and it was actually a really good excuse to maintain that ruined aspect of this end of the original structure. But still, we wanted to not just have it as a sort of cosy sort of, oh look, there's the ruin and there's the house. So there is some degree of engagement with the other end of the ruin, which was much more solid. And then coming out here, a new big defensive wall, bulk of the new accommodation.